Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to Epiphany Station. My name is Matty Taus, and I'm one of the pastors here, and I want to thank you for choosing to spend some time with us this morning as we launch into our brand new teaching series, Blessed Are the Misfits. Before we do, can I just get a quick show of hands? Who was able to celebrate Easter with us this year? Last week, who was able to be here? Awesome, thank you. And how many of you came back this week because you wanted to see if I would wear a tie again? Happy to disappoint. But just for a second, before we move on, there's something I want to make notice of, which is if you were a part, even in you think the smallest of ways, of preparing us to welcome people to Easter, would you put your hand in the air, please? If you were a part in any way, shape, or form, would you give these guys a round of applause, please? An amazing amount of work went in. And it wasn't just to have a good time, because most people didn't, but we were able to welcome over 600 people. And we were able to see 10 people make decisions to follow Jesus Christ last weekend. And that's what we're all about. Now, if you were here last week, and if you were here and you were listening, you will know that this week we're picking up on the conversation we basically started last week of, okay, if Easter, what now? If Easter it was a legit thing where Jesus did give us this opportunity to have a relationship with him, what does it now look like? And this is where we've birthed out this teaching series, Blessed Are the Misfits, because Easter is so full of contrast, of beauty and ugliness, and that's what helps us understand that relationship. But still, beyond that, if we do start a relationship with God in any way, a lot of us can feel like we are misfits trying to fit into something we don't understand. Now, a misfit is just someone or something that fits badly. It's not melding, it's not joining, it's not connecting into what it's trying to be a part of. I'd like you to do something for me before we continue. On your program, as you walked in, you were handed this, and there's this, on the very top is a question. It says, what makes you feel like a misfit? Even if you don't write it down, I want you to think about that and maybe write it down. What makes you feel like a misfit in the world? Because I asked this question on Facebook this last week, and the response was extraordinary. Nobody said anything. I mean, hundreds of people said things, and they were very honest about what makes them feel like a misfit in the world. And it was an incredibly honest conversation in which we saw people talking about such things as not being able to make friends or not feeling like they're good socially. Some people, their financial situation makes them feel like a misfit. Others, their parenting or marriage choices. Some people feel like a misfit because they're quiet. Others feel like a misfit because they're loud. But if you go down the whole list, there was just this feeling of, I'm just not perfect. And because of that, it makes me anxious and it fills me with doubt that I could ever fit into anything. One of the things that was a little more saddening but not unexpected was when I asked the same question in relation to how you feel you might be a misfit at church. If you do go to church, if you have gone to church, what makes you feel like a misfit? And again, the answers were varied. Some people feel like a misfit because they're ignored. Some people feel like a misfit because there's too many people there. Some people feel like a misfit because they don't get emotional in the experience, and some feel like misfits because they can't be anything but emotional. We can feel like we're misfits because of our kids misbehaving or having no kids, or we can feel like misfits because of our dress sense or our worship style. But the big problem is, if we're going to have a relationship with God in any way, shape, or form, it's not okay for us to consider continuously that we're just missing out on something, and therefore we're an imposter. For people to go to church and feel like they're just faking it and hoping people don't find them out is no way for us to further embrace a relationship with God or be part of a church. So we want to put that to one side and instead have a conversation over the next 6 weeks of what it means to be a blessed misfit. Now, I believe that feeling like a misfit starts young, like super young. Even like when you're in like elementary school, there are some things that could make you feel like a misfit, like looking like that young man does. Yes, I was cute once. And my mom sent these pictures because she loves me. And because I've got one of those faces that only a mother loves. And as I grew up, it got a little bit more awkward, and it just continued. And aside from looking awkward, I was a very awkward individual all the way through school. I hated school because I was always anxious. I really wanted to fit in. Most of us go through that experience in school. Most of us, in fact, don't leave that experience behind when we graduate. Instead, we go into maybe marriages, friendship groups, or the workplace, and we still feel like something's missing, like we still don't fit in. In fact, a lot of us would probably go on vacation on the island of misfit toys if it was legit. Like that would make us feel like we belong with that group of people. And we live in that. And we have to ask ourselves, when we feel like a misfit, what are we going to do? Because there really are two options. One is be who you are. The other is change. The other is conform. The other is to become chameleonic in that you will be what you need to be to fit into the environment around you. And that's all well and good, all up until the point that you forget actually who you are and what you like or who you like or what you're like. And it's not okay for us just to look across and say we're all misfits, therefore we need to find some sort of central mass in which we can all gather around and try and be the same as each other. Instead, we want to embrace this idea that being a misfit is a good thing. That misfits are blessed, and we don't get this idea on our own. We stole it from the Bible. But often when we talk about misfits, it's never in a positive connotation. It's usually more in the degree of, I hate being one. No one likes feeling like they're on the outside or that they're missing something or they're a part of something they just don't get. But when Jesus started teaching, one of his most famous teachings ever, the Sermon on the Mount, he called out a bunch of people that he said were blessed. And he seemed to call out nothing but misfits. He said things like, blessed are those who are poor in spirit and realize that something's dreadfully wrong. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are humble. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice because something is unjust. He said, bless those who are merciful, those who strive and thrive for peace and purity. Basically, blessed are those who actually don't seem to fit in with culture whatsoever. Have you ever asked the question why Jesus is not calling out, blessed are the joyful, or blessed are the rich, or blessed are the bold, or blessed are the achievers? Why are those guys not the ones that Jesus is calling God blessed? See, Jesus' perspective is very confusing. Because not only does he teach like this, he lives like this. And when he first calls together the very first church, the people who are then going to reflect him to the world, he gets a handful of fishermen, a tax guy, a few arrogant brothers, some fanatical, zealous people, and then, a couple of people that will just eventually betray him. And it's confusing as to why he's calling these people together, as much as it's confusing when you look at the church today. And God, standing in the candy store of people, looking for followers, looking for people to call to make the church, decided on us. Decided to look around and say, I'm going to start off with some farmers, because God created farmers. And then I'll sprinkle in a couple of Canadians over here. And then I'll have 2 doubters, 3 strugglers, 14 addicts, and a bunch of people that are horribly wounded and struggling. And that is the church that I'm going to create. And those are the people that I'm going to make my people. Now, if you get nothing else from our conversation today, I want you to understand this, and I want you to believe me, whether you believe me or not. Believe me. If you feel like a misfit in church, you are not alone. As much as you think everyone else has got it together and that they're playing that game of I have it together, they don't. We are a bunch of misfits trying to understand and work out this thing about having a relationship with God. You have reason to be relieved. Because as much time as Jesus spends around misfits, and as much time as he doesn't spend trying to get them to fit in, instead embracing who they are, it would appear God has this thing for misfits. This desire, this love for passion, people who just don't fit in where they go. Maybe, just maybe, church is supposed to be misfitting. Maybe that's where we fit. The labeled and the overlooked and the skeptical and the strugglers and the unfeelers. These are the people that are blessed by God, and these are the people that misfit into this ragtag bunch, one come all thing he calls church. So that's what we want to do with this series, and if you've got any feelings like me about this stuff, it's going to be a good series for you to walk through with us. Because we're not supposed to be tolerated as an outlier of the church. We're supposed to be wholeheartedly embraced and included into the mosaic and tapestry of what God is providing the rest of the world to see and point at and say, look what I can do with them. Now, one thing of our conversation today, one thing that I think makes us feel like misfits in the church is when we've heard all sorts of things about what we can expect or what we should experience when we come into a relationship with God, and then it doesn't pan out. Doesn't happen that way. All these things of, well, if you come to Jesus, everything will be okay. And coming to God basically means just a good addition to the side of your life, and then he'll start to work things out, and you'll be healed, and you'll be promised. And a lot of those things are experienced by people. Like great tangible expressions, miracles seen, healings done. But not for the most of us. The most of us don't see those things. The most of us don't hear those things. We don't feel those things. So what are we supposed to do when offered this relationship with God based on all of these experiences, all these things being made right in our lives? What are we supposed to do with it when they're not? If you ever spent your time looking around thinking, I wish my life was like theirs, or I wish I had their faith. They obviously are really well connected in with God. That's this kind of thing that we're trying to work on to see if there is a problem with us, or just maybe a problem with what's expected from someone coming into relationship with God. But let me ask you this question. Have you ever felt like there's something missing in your relationship with him? Have you ever felt like there's something you don't quite get about God or about the church or about faith? There's something disjointed between what you think you should be experiencing and what you are experiencing. Does anyone in this room feel like that? Put your hands up if you do. Okay, thank you. Now I want you to put your hand up if someone has ever told you that's your fault, that you're not doing it right, thank you, you're not reading the Bible right, you're not praying right, you're not singing right, you're not churching it right. Because of what you're doing, you're ruining your relationship with God. This is a very pervasive lie that is fed to people to help them think and believe that they are 100% responsible for their relationship with God. Because if you are 100% responsible, then if it's starting to look like it's not right or it's kind of off kilter or misfitting, then it's 100% your fault. You're 100% to blame. And a lot of people live in that guilt and that shame, and that's why we don't talk about it. Why it's not okay to not be okay in church, because if we're not okay, it's me. It's what I'm doing wrong. I want to propose a couple of challenges to you today, and one of them is, what if we're not supposed to feel like everything's okay? What if it is supposed to be right now misfitting? What if not feeling like this is it and I've got it all together? What if that is actually a right relationship with God? That misfitting pieces fit perfectly in a place where we don't expect that. Because for Jesus not to call those who are satisfied, blessed, those who have arrived, blessed, those who know enough, blessed, but instead to call people like me and you blessed, seems to point us in the direction that instead he's got a different plan for who his church is going to be. That it won't be based on what we expect to happen, but actually he says will happen. And that any experience of him, any warm fuzzies, any emotion, any miracles, any signs, they would be just that, just signs, but not the full experience of what we get to have with God. You might have heard this term, and I think I've used it already a couple of times this morning. When we talk about having a relationship with God or with Jesus, we call it a relationship. To have a relationship with God, a relationship with Jesus. It's basically the church's effort to try and describe the type of connection that we get to have with him. And God goes to a great degree to try and communicate the type of relationship and what we should and should not expect in that relationship with him. And he calls it a marriage. And he doesn't just call it a marriage, he hammers it home that it's going to be a marriage. Now the problem for us when we hear or see that or are told that is we bring our experiences of what marriage should be or could be into our expectation of relationship with God. For some people, being married to God will mean this is going to be perfect. This is going to be beautiful. I'm going to forever and eternally feel embraced by the arms of Jesus. That is some mush that gets peddled by some people, and I can only think it's the people that haven't been married yet and don't truly get what actually happens in there. But the other side of the coin is, faith is like marriage? No thanks. I do not need heaven-sized plates thrown at my head. I do not need the silent treatment from Jesus. And we become disjointed from what God is actually saying about that relationship, because God has said definitively and distinctly as we walk through it, us, or me, plus God equals marriage. There's no other type of relationship on offer, just that one. And he goes a great deal into describing what that is supposed to look like. He talks about it. Jesus does things to communicate it. Apostles and writers of the New Testament affirm it. The Apostle Paul once wrote that, as a man leaves his father and his mother and is united into one with his wife, it's a great mystery, but that is an illustration of how Christ and the church are one. When Jesus was talking about marriage, when he said it's going to be like marriage with me, he was talking about marriage how he sees it. And what would happen when people were getting married in his day were very different to what we might experience. Jewish marriage was very different. See, this is what would happen. There would be a man, and he would decide that he's going to be a groom. He's going to initiate a relationship with a future bride. And he decides on the woman that he is going to call his own, and they're united fully. So what he does is he takes gifts, things that are going to show this person value, and he takes them to her father's home, and he says, this is what you mean to me, would you be mine? This is me trying to show you some essence of value for what I think of you, would you be mine? And then he would pour a big goblet of wine, get drunk, I'm only kidding. He'd pour a big goblet of wine, and he would drink from it, and if the bride agreed, she would drink from it too. And that was the union cup. That was the covenant. That was the moment where they both declared, we're going to do this. We're now engaged. But something would really different and weird would happen that we're not used to in the context of marriage scene then, is that he would then leave. He would leave to go and to prepare a place for them to live, usually in his father's own house. He would do a little bit of like an annex, new honeymoon annex. Good soundproofing in between. And when he left, he would leave her with all sorts of gifts and promises and saying, I'm coming back. I'm going to collect you. When I'm absent, don't fear, don't doubt, don't get confused, don't get distracted. I'm coming back to have you, and I want you to keep these things of mine as proof of that. But then he would be gone. And the absence could be days, weeks, months, or years. And it wasn't up to him, it was up to his dad. His dad would say, yes, this house is now ready for you to bring your wife. You have prepared it sufficiently for you to bring her home. And then one day, without thinking that it could be the day or not, the bride would hear trumpet blasts and horns being blown and a whole entourage of people singing and shouting and yelling in delight as the groom's party comes to her house and says, I'm ready. I'm ready to take you home. He would collect her. They would have a huge wedding banquet, which would culminate in them being intimate for the first time in their new home to represent now we are spiritually one until death. Now, I know what you're thinking at this point. Maddie, you're so wise. What you're actually thinking is that is some great historical information that seems to have very little to do with what we're talking about today. And I will agree with you. I just said it to sound smart. And I will agree with you all up until a certain point. And the certain point is that can just be historical information, or that can be information that is crucial if we want to understand the type of relationship we can have with Jesus Christ. The type of relationship and where we are at in that relationship. If we want that, this becomes very important to understand what we should expect and what we shouldn't. Because Jesus mirrored the exact inaction of proposal and engagement and marriage so that we could see and understand the similarities. It started with his proposal the night before he was killed. And he sat his family down, he sat his loved ones down, and he said, I'm going to give you a gift, and I want you to agree with me. If you want to agree, we're going to drink from this cup together, that we're going to be united. In Luke 22, it says he took some bread, gave thanks to God for it, then he broke it into pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. After supper, he took another cup of wine and said, this cup is the new covenant between God and his people. It's an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as sacrifice to you. He arrives at this table to propose, I will give my everything for you. Your value is everything to me. I will give all of my body, all of my life, because I love you. I love you, my people. I love you, my church. That is my gift to show you the value, and here is the cup. Here is the union cup, and if you choose to, you can accept the offer of this relationship between you and your God. And then he leaves. He leaves, and everyone is confounded, but before he leaves, he explains to them why he's leaving. In John chapter 14, he says, look, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust in me. There is more than enough room in my Father's home. If it were not so, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? When everything is ready, I will come and get you, so that you will always be with me where I am." In leaving, he went to prepare a place. This place that we've come to call heaven, this place where he could bring his church into his Father's home. Well, what about the thing that you said that he's supposed to leave gifts and promises so that she wouldn't wander away or get confused or fear? Don't worry. Continuing on in chapter 14, he says, "Look, I'm leaving you with this gift. A gift of peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid. Remember what I told you. I'm going away, but I will come back to you again." Now, I'm not one of those people, I guess even one of those pastors who will stand there and say, "Well, if you knew as much as I do about the Bible, then you would fully understand and appreciate your relationship with God, and maybe you should just read them out there, one day when you're all grown up and you're a proper Christian." But you can get lost in that argument that you don't understand anything without extreme context of what Jesus is saying. I don't agree with that. I agree with the Bible is understandable from the youngest age, intentionally. But I also believe that God did some things to try and help us understand some of the details of this relationship with him. And this would be one of them. This would be one of them because for him to say this about marriage, for Jesus to do these things in relationship to marriage helps us understand a ton of things, but one thing specifically in our conversation today. We're not married yet. We are not in the full, intimate relationship with our God. We're not. We're engaged. We're engaged because he said that we're engaged, that he offered a relationship to us. Now he's gone and he's preparing a place for us, but we have not been brought home. We're not in heaven. We're not experiencing perfection. And if it's okay for us to understand that and appreciate that, it can begin to answer the question, why do things feel off now? Why do things not feel quite right? Why does God not feel so close to me? Why does he feel absent? Why do I not experience everything people have said I should experience in a relationship with God? Simply because we are together, yet apart. We have relationship, but not fully. And this is what God wants to communicate about now. Your next 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, 80 years, 100 years, is that it will not be perfect because it is a period of waiting, and waiting sucks. My wife and I, Jackie and I, while we were engaged and preparing to be married, we lived some 3,700 miles apart, which was downright awful because I kind of like her. Because we had such affection for each other, the absence bred some things in us that were not so good. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Twaddle, absolute twaddle. Absence makes the heart grow angry. And we'd be willing to communicate with each other in later years in vulnerability and say, look, during that time, it was really bad because doubts were creeping in all the time. Do they really love me? Is he actually going to see this thing through? Is he actually going to leave his home to come to me? Will she actually accept someone with these kind of teeth? I mean, all sorts of questions that filled us with fear and confusion and, quite frankly, distraction. Now, if we don't understand and own that we are right now waiting, and we see these problems in our relationship with God, that it's not quite where we want it to be or what other people say it could be, should be, then we're just going to blame us. I'm doing it wrong. Something's wrong with me. God doesn't love me. He's abandoned me. I'm on the shelf. I've sinned too much. And I don't get to have this thing that others are talking about. Instead of being able to say, something's missing, and that's okay. This is not all and everything that Jesus Christ ever said that we should expect in relationship with him. Something's not happened yet, so we should be able to own that. It's why he went to such great degree to say, you're going to need to remember this. You're going to need to remember my vow. You're going to need to remember my promise. You're going to need to remember Easter on a daily basis. Because waiting for me is going to be really tough. It's why he gives things like the Holy Spirit, this gift I'm going to leave with you, this peace of mind and heart. to say, remember what I told you, I will come back for you again. These things are to help us wait well. These glimpses, these experiences, these things that we do see or don't see are all just there to give us peace of mind and hope into what's coming in the future. But in this period of waiting, it often doesn't feel like waiting. I don't know if you've started a relationship with God ever before, but sometimes it can feel like you're not waiting, you've been jilted. You're standing at the altar saying, isn't something supposed to be happening today? And all of a sudden, you're the one that's in the wrong. And that's not what Jesus ever said. He said there are some things we should expect. We should expect life change. We should expect to know that we can change, to have the hope of that, to have the peace of that, to be able to trust in his promises. But never did he say, and therefore it will be everything, or it will be perfect. Because even the greatest experience of God you've ever had, the greatest emotional or intellectual revelation you've ever experienced, or seeing God work tangibly, it's just a glimpse. It's just a glimpse. It is not everything. Something is still missing, and we are still waiting. And what we're waiting for is the wedding day. What we're waiting for is the wedding day that is promised for those who will wait, who will be engaged in relationship with him and patiently wait. Because one day the waiting will end. There's going to come a time when the church doesn't even see it coming, and over the horizon we'll hear noise. And it'll be like a trumpet blast, and it'll be like a horn being blown. It'll be like people cheering and being elated, because one day the wedding day is actually going to happen. One day all of the waiting and all of the things that make us feel like a misfit and unwelcome and unloved will be wiped away. One day we will be embraced, and Jesus will arrive and say, I'm ready to take you home. I'm ready to take you into my Father's home. I'm ready to be together with you forever. So God said, blessed are the waiting. God has said, blessed are those who are waiting and invited to that day. Revelation 19, which whenever you pick a chapter out of Revelation, it's terribly frightening. A man who once experienced this day in a foretelling or a prophecy, whatever you want to call it, just to get a glimpse. He said, then I heard what sounded like a shout of a vast crowd, or the roar of mighty ocean waves, or the crash of loud thunder. Praise the Lord, for the Lord our God, the Almighty reigns. Let us be glad and rejoice, and let us give honor to him, for the time has come for the wedding feast of the Lamb, and his bride has prepared herself. She's been given the finest of pure white linen to wear, for the fine linen represents the good deeds of God's holy people. And the angel said to me, write this, like it's important, write this. Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding feast of the Lamb. And he added, those are true words that come from God. It's the wedding day that we're waiting for. It's not just to do church. It's not to have a better life. It's the wedding day. Blessed are those who are going to be invited to that day of absolute full unity with the God who created them. So if that's true, then it needs to be okay in our churches to say it's not okay right now. It should be, when you think about it, the only place, or one of the only places where it can say, life currently sucks, but I still have hope. It should be okay for us to hunger and thirst for justice in a very unjust world. It should be okay for us to constantly struggle against that which would try and separate us from him. It should be okay for us to mourn that things are not the way that they're supposed to be. It should be okay for us to wait, knowing we're not perfect, knowing that we're going to screw up, knowing that we're going to be misfits, yet to wait. If we can wait and know we're waiting, we will fend off things like despondency and doubt and despair, and instead get to enjoy perseverance, endurance, and hope. To be able to understand and appreciate that this relationship with God thing is not some magic wand on the first day, that now everything is going to be great for you. It is an offer, an eternal offer, that you will live out the rest of your days on earth and then into eternity in response. And Jesus says, would you want that kind of relationship with me? The first step in loving God and loving people, a step we take continually, is to accept that kind of offer. It's to understand we're not the initiators of the relationship, we're recipients. The first part of loving God and loving people is not putting on nice clothes and making sure you look okay and tidying up your house and then trying to prove something. It is just coming to receive. As Jesus says, can you, will you, do you wish to respond to this offer of relationship with your God? We say, yeah. And we want to understand. And we want to own it. And we want to know it. And we want to now live patiently or impatiently, waiting as a bunch of misfits, waiting to fit in. Every week at Epiphany Station, we have these things we call next steps. Stuff that we do have to take if we want to have this relationship. The first is to accept the offer. If you never have, or you've never understood it, or for some reason this whole relationship thing has just been confusing or very badly put by another, you can, whenever you wish, accept this offer of relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's all sugar plums and rainbows. I'm saying the offer is there between you and your God continuously. It's why Jesus. It's why Easter. It's why communion. It's why church. Not for today, but for eternity. And accepting an offer means stepping into that. The second step that we have to be able to take on a regular basis is to remember the vow. It's all too easy for us to get distracted from what really matters in life. And once you've accepted the relationship with Jesus Christ, all sort of things will come at you to try and distract you from it. But Christ doesn't mess about when it comes to remembering the vow. He even says you're going to do something on regular occasion to make sure you remember the vow. Because my vow is eternal, my vow is unbreakable, my vow is for you. And if you just forget about it, you will miss the whole point of what you're waiting for. So he does this thing. He sits his family down and says, do you want this? He offers them what we call today communion. He says this bread, this is going to be for you to use to remember. That's the gift. That's the gift portion. Everything of Christ for you. The blood, this is for you to remember. This is a union. This is a communion. This is for me and you together forever. Do you want to step into it? Do you want it? We're going to do something here in a minute which is going to give you the opportunity to maybe start that relationship with Jesus Christ, or maybe just to remember the vow. We're going to take communion together. The way we do it here at Epiphany is really simple. Communion's on the corners of the stage. The worship team will be playing a song. I'd ask you to come into the middle aisle, head up and around and down, back down the sides. And what I'm going to have you do this week, which is a bit different from normal, is I'm just going to have you hold on to that and not take it right away, but wait till the end of the song when I come back up. As we take communion together, or you might choose to, I hope you understand maybe just a little bit more today. It's not about flashing a membership card to say you can have it. It's about a decision that you're ready to make. To accept the marriage between Christ and the church, the relationship between you and your God. And you can make that decision today, if you wish to. So now I'm going to invite the worship team to play, and I'm going to invite you to take, or at least grab, communion with us.
All the poor and powerless, and all the lost and lonely, all the thieves will come confess and know that you are holy. Will know that you are holy, and all will sing out hallelujah. We will cry out hallelujah. hearts who are content, and all who feel unworthy, all who hurt with nothing left, will know that you are holy, will know that you are holy, and all will sing out hallelujah. We will cry out hallelujah, and all will sing out hallelujah. We will cry out hallelujah. So shout it, go on and scream it from the mountains, go on and tell it to the masses. He is God. Shout it, go on and scream it from the mountains, go on and tell it to the masses that He is God. Shout it, go on and scream it from the mountains, go on and tell it to the masses that He is God. Shout it, go on and scream it from the mountains, go on and tell it to the masses that He is God. We will sing out hallelujah. We will cry out hallelujah. We will sing out hallelujah.
I want to invite you to stand with me as we pray. Father God, we thank you that you are the initiator of this relationship, that you love us a great deal more than we can comprehend. And God, as we take communion today, I ask that you would make it incredibly clear what it means for us to step in this relationship with you, what you actually expect and what you don't expect, what you offer and what you don't. That we would step into this knowing that we just get to love you. We get to be made into people that love people, and we get to enjoy and look forward to heaven. We get to look forward to that day that we get to have that full relationship with you. So God, we thank you as we take this communion together. We ask you to bless us as misfits. In Jesus' name, amen. You can go ahead and take communion. The final thing I'll say before we close in worship, or really the final step, the step that we have to take, is to wait expectantly. To be willing to own the fact that this isn't it, that tomorrow's going to come, tomorrow's going to have its difficulties and its problems. And as we worship, I want to invite you to do something very particular and specific. I want you to listen to what you're singing and to ask questions about what you're singing and to use it to ask questions of God that maybe frustrate you, individual, personal, deep questions as to why it is not how you want it to be. As we close together, if you're in that place where you can have more of a conversation of what it means to be part of God's family, maybe for the first time, maybe just a new way to understand, you can use a couple of things. We have an amazing prayer team in the back corner that you can use during worship or during the end of the experience. And as always, we have these connection cards littered throughout the worship space for you to be able to use to communicate anything with us. But we would love to follow up specifically with those who are wanting to move forward in their relationship with God and in the offer that he gives. Thank you.